delusion collapses. The ways that Christoph keeps Truman deluded are the most striking aspects of the allegory. The most obvious and egregious of these is how Truman is kept complacent by exploiting his deepest fears. For example, Truman's aquaphobia works perfectly to keep Truman on the island. Christoph even risks Truman overcoming this fear when he sends Truman to unsuccessfully board the boat. The fact that Truman can't overcome his phobia only reinforces this. Truman is also constantly barraged by propaganda and subliminal messages to induce a fear of flying. There are constant reminders of the dangers of flying. It takes this rampant fear-mongering to keep Truman's delusion alive. However, this time the propaganda starts to weaken. Truman still fantasizes about taking a flight to Fiji. His aquaphobia is still strong, but it's revealed that this is most likely because it originates from the undressed guilt over Truman's father's death. But it's not just the fear that influences Truman. The control that Christoph has over his world is total. Everything Truman takes in on a daily basis is designed with a secret purpose. The TV he watches reinforces the message. The media always has headlines directly promoting whatever they want Truman to believe. Even the people that Truman talks to on a daily basis spout the same canned lines and positive affirmations. Propaganda is seeping into every aspect of Truman's life and society.
You thinking of flying somewhere?
Nope.
Oh, good.
A lot like its infiltration of our society. Just like Truman, we're always bombarded with propaganda just to keep us complacently unaware of the delusions of modern ideology. Every day society tells us who we are, what we ought to do, and who our enemies are. Just like Truman, we're encouraged to ignore the clues that we're living in a lie, where we're made to still become wages in the matrix, and then everyone who buys into the societal delusion helps perpetuate it. This means that lots of well-meaning, rational people are swept up to become mouthpieces of a failing system. The cracks are present in both reality and fiction. They just exist solely on the personal level for Truman, rather than the societal level that we're starting to see. But what is the society-wide delusion? Well, in The Truman Show, it's obvious and literal. It's the premise of the movie. The Truman Show is a reality show. But how does this translate into our real world? Well, this is where it gets interesting. The habitus is a tool used by sociologists for describing the ways in which a society's culture functions. Society rests upon an enormous amount of unsaid rules and expectations. These are often performed without thinking about them. It's more like a learned skill than a conscious decision. Bourdieu, the French intellectual who brought the term to prominence, often compared it to sports. People tend to know the rules of the game. For example, it's generally accepted that when you're finished at the supermarket, you return your shopping cart. There's no personal reward or egotistic incentive, it's just a learned polite expectation. In the context of the supermarket though, it's very important. The whole system would collapse without it. Some abstracts of the habitus are nearly invisible because they seem so natural to us. Even your taste in music or food are influenced by the habitus. This is because the cultural expectations that the habitus instills go so deep. They're established from the moment you're born, reinforced throughout your childhood by your family, and then further built upon by your education and work. This then makes the habitus a self-perpetuating structure. Those brought up in certain habitus will nurture its specific values in their children, for example, making sure the cycle continues. The Truman Show gives a literal picture of what a habitus can look like. We can see all the actors in the fictional Truman Show as being sucked into this. The actors act in certain learned ways in order to perpetuate the essence of the Truman Show. Now, the key difference between fiction and reality is the incentive. Literally, the actors in the fictional Truman Show are being paid to play their parts, but in the real world, people play their parts in the habitus because the habitus itself has conditioned them into it. Everyone is one of the actors. Everyone makes the delusion real. And what the Truman Show goes on to tell us is that when the habitus has been altered into something too detached from an authentic society, cracks start to show. When lies start to perpetuate, when the ego gets in the way, when power corrupts, the habitus starts to break, and this ripples throughout entire civilizations. See, throughout the movie's progression, we see Truman gradually wake up to the delusion that has consumed his life, which inevitably causes a breakdown of the entire habitus. The further Truman moves towards truth, the faster the delusion collapses, and thus the more resistance he faces. The habitus of our world is just as deluded as the one in the Truman Show. This is because what's valuable culturally has been drastically changed by reality TV and social media. The Truman Show almost predicted this with its commentary on reality TV. The vapid values of reality TV expanded to shape the entire habitus, now limited to reality TV, and this doesn't seem too harmful. But it gets so much worse when you consider this in our own reality, especially with the effects of social media on our values. Nowadays, everyone's the star of their own reality TV show. People project vapid and unattainable standards by advertising a fake life on social media.
That 14-year-old girls who use social media more than 5 hours a day saw a 50% spike in depression symptoms.
This feeds into people's values. They see other people's fake lives lives and hold their own up to the same standard. These people then perpetuate the cycle, which then brings the habitus further and further away from authenticity and truth. Corporatization of society is then also reflected in the habitus of both the Truman Show and in our own society. In the Truman Show, the effects are obvious. Truman's wife is constantly advertising and shitting brands. It's almost a learned response that has been ingrained into her.
You really ought to throw out that mower. Get one of those new elk rotaries.